This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our December quarterly and final meeting of 2020. Anytime I hear anybody say final anything of 2020, I celebrate. Looking forward to, we've got a very substantive and full agenda today and an important number of important topics. But as usual, we want to start by offering the opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment? Just make sure you're not on mute if you do. Okay, going once, twice. Very good. We'll move on then to item number 3, which is review and approval of the minutes for September 16th meeting. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at those. Thank you very much, Linda, for putting those together and getting them circulated. Is there anyone that would like an extra minute to look at the minutes before we call for a motion? Okay, very good. Then we'll ask for a motion for approval of the September 16th joint committee meeting minutes.
This is John Harity. I make a motion to approve.
Hello, John. Good to hear you.
Hey.
Thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
Michael, I'll second.
Thank you, Michael. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And are there any abstentions? Okay, very good. Thank you all. The meeting minutes are approved. We'll move on then to section item number 4, which is taking a look at our meeting schedule for the upcoming year. Brian, do we want to characterize those in any way? Are they any magic to those particular dates, or?
Yeah, so for the most part, these dates mimicked our schedule from this year. I think it's the third Wednesday of every month. And we've tried to match up our meeting months with the various strategic planning processes for both the C&LM plan and the comprehensive plan of the Green Bank, as well as all the other things that are going around legislative session, for example. So this is consistent with this year's schedule.
Right. And is this for members' information, or do we need to have a formal approval of these?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it would be great if there was a motion to approve these dates, then we can post them.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. We'll get them up. That doesn't mean we can't change them if we need to. But appreciate you pulling those together. Any comment before going further? All right. If not, we'll ask for a motion to approve the schedule of meetings as proposed.
It's John Harity. Motion to approve.
Thank you, John. Second?
I'll second, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good. Thank you. We now have our meeting schedule approved for 2021. Next, we're going to item number 5, which is our latest discussion on where things stands with the energy jobs report and where we're going next with that. So I'm not sure. Is that you, Brian?
Yeah, why don't I take it? Thank you, Eric. So just a quick update on our first clean energy industry report, 2020. So we were probably having this conversation last year at this time, perhaps it was at the fall meeting, where we were working collectively together to develop a jobs report on the status of the clean energy industry. We successfully pulled that together, contracting with BW Research. I will go through in a second how we how we disseminated that information. But also last week, the U.S. Climate Alliance released its report following the same methodology. And the Connecticut section uses our data. You might all recall that one of the initial steps we took working with BW Research was to make sure that Connecticut's job classifications were in alignment with the policies of the state of Connecticut as opposed to a broad national lens. So the U.S. Climate Alliance report used our numbers, which is good. So for consistency. In terms of next steps and where we've been, so we had a successful press release. Thank you to everyone for working jointly on that press release. We held a webinar in mid-November. We had 51 attendees, 80 registrants. That 75% is pretty typical. 60 to 70% is pretty much a rule of thumb of attendees to registrants. Thank you to all of those who participated, including our colleagues over at the Department of Labor, who talked about career ladders and green jobs, as well as I'm sure our EDC colleagues felt really good about the contractors that were involved. I thought their perspectives were really important in terms of COVID's impacts on their business and how the deep utility green bank response was in terms of helping them manage through these difficult times. So if you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. That was my favorite portion of the whole thing, was hearing from them. We will send around that webinar after today's meeting. We had really good earned media coverage from the press release from a number of different publications we're all used to, including a radio interview, which I didn't have the chance of listening to, but I'm pretty sure, I will check back in with Rudy, I'm pretty sure this included our Department of Labor colleague, if not Philip from BW Research, as a follow-up to that press conference, that online press conference. One of the things that I'd love to work on with our EDC colleagues and kind of Rudy in the lead is taking the report and boiling it down to a one-page fact sheet. You all might recall we went into the legislative session for the last 2 years with a one-page fact sheet. So if we can just take the data from our new report and just create a fact sheet, we can all use that as we're having our various conversations with legislative leaders during session. And lastly, we talked about this last time, there was interest in wanting to continue with a 2021 version of the report. So I've begun to try to find a date, if not next week, early in the new year, with BW Research, our EDC colleagues administering the C&LM, and Mike Lee, to see if we can start a conversation on the statement of work for this new project. It went very well this year. I think administratively, our collaboration with the utilities has been great. You know, the processing of the checks and getting all the contracts and stuff in place was just really easy. And then working collectively together through the process just felt, knock on wood, seamless. Looking forward to working with folks on that statement of work. And I think what we can do is, as we pull together that statement of work, we'll just reach back out to the joint committee members and, with the draft statement of work and get a sense from you all if you have any questions or comments, and then we'll just continue to proceed. I guess the only final thing I would add is that you might recall that BW Research talked a lot about the data collection aspects and how that was really the funding responsibility of the U.S. Department of Energy, which is the case. There's actually an appropriation to support that work, but the appropriation had never been executed through the DOE. So the hope is coming into the new year with an incoming administration that those funds will be released and supporting BW research for that data collection aspect of the project. So if that works, then we're likely to see a big reduction in our budget as the federal government picks up that work for the entire country. So I'm optimistic that that will happen. But I think that's it. Any questions, comments?
Just a lot
Hi,
of.
this is John Harity. I just wanted to say that
Hey,
I
John.
think all the stuff this is on jobs is it's just really important to helping drive more green technology and to have people understand that there's a lot of social benefits beyond the green aspect itself. So these reports really prove that that's the case. So it's great that we've participated in this stuff.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback.
Okay. Terrific. Well, thank you, Brian, and the whole team that worked on that and continues to work on it. And we'll be continuing to work, I guess, next year on a new iteration. But, you know, to John's point, it's always good to have the data to back up the impact of what we're doing. So a very worthwhile project, I think. Okay. We'll move on then to item 6. This is a really important part of the function of this group, I think, and both boards have been working hard to find ways to bring the planning process and reporting process together. And so we're pleased to have an update from both folks, both boards, on how that's progressing for the upcoming year and years, actually. So I think we're going to start with the Green Bank. And Brian, I'll kick it to you then.
Great. Yeah, we will kick it off and then we'll turn it to Glenn, who will coordinate on the C&LM plan in the 2022 through 2024 plan. So just kind of grounding us all in where we are in our process here at the Green Bank. So it's pretty typical in the December, January timeframe for us to take a look. We're halfway into our fiscal year on where we're at. And in the first of January, we've got a budget operations and compensation committee meeting, which is what John Harity chairs. And we will, through that committee, be talking about any proposed revisions to the comprehensive plan budget or targets. And then we recommend any of those changes to the board, which will happen in the third week of January, the third Friday of January. So that would be a budget operations and compensation committee recommendation. Some of the things we're thinking about are around equity and vulnerable communities issues. In the recent passage of the bill that dealt with the storm response and the electric rates, there was the passage of a definition around vulnerable communities. Definition's really good. It provides a foundation for equity. So we're looking at including that definition.
Hey, Brian,
Yeah.
can we get somebody to stop, put themselves on mute for the typing?
Yeah, who is typing?
I think it's Glenn. It keeps popping up as Glenn speaking.
My apologies. There we go.
Kick Glenn off the meeting.
Thanks, Mike. So would be to take a look at incorporating that vulnerable communities definition into the comprehensive plan. It provides a really strong framework for equity. And then the other thing that we would like to talk about is setting an equity target. We've been focused extensively for probably the last 5+ years on ensuring investment in clean energy deployment in low to moderate income communities and communities of color. So one of the things we're looking at is establishing a possible target, an equity target of no less than 40% of investment from our two program areas, incentive and financing programs, by 2025 would go into vulnerable communities. And then on targets, we'll talk about that in a second. We may consider revising some of our 2021 targets given better than expected performance. I'll talk about that in a second. And then programs, just kind of updating things that have occurred since June when the comprehensive plan was approved by the board. The RCIP-E extension of the RCIP program, happy to go into that if anybody has any questions on that. Our solarized storage submission in docket 17-1203. So including some of that language within our comprehensive plan. Those are just a few things that we're noodling on, John, that might be coming your way in early January as the staff gets its arms around. But if there are other things, Glenn and our utility colleagues, that you want us to take a look at, happy to sit down and work through that with you. In terms of our targets, so we have two programs that our organization, or kind of business units that our organization is set up into. One is our incentive programs, and the second is our financing programs. Our incentive programs, you could think of them as performance-based cost recovery. We administer programs that are statutorily authorized or authorized in other ways, where we hope to recover our operating expenses by delivering measurable results. The RCIP residential solar incentive program is within that program area. And as you can see to the right, we are ahead of where we thought we were going to be. We set two targets broadly across all our programs. One was like a worst case target given COVID. And the second was not a best case, but kind of like maybe a usual case without COVID, maybe a little bit worse than that. So we set these ranges across all of our different programs, and you can see that we are ahead of target. We're ahead of the worst case where we thought we could potentially be. So that is a good sign. So I'm challenging our team to take a look at possibly revising the upper end of the targets. So this would go, if we were to do that, would go back to the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee in early January with a revision. On the financing programs, we'll get into those with the updates here in a second. I think the only real interesting thing here is, we didn't talk too much about it last time, is that we actually added a greenhouse gas emissions avoided target, which is our fourth goal. We've typically only had 3 goals over the last 8+ years around projects, total investment, and installed capacity. We've since added a GHG emissions avoided goal to be consistent with our mission, but to also support an electric vehicle recharging station offset program that we are administering on behalf of a number of EV recharging companies and EV manufacturers. So more there. And then just lastly, literally right now, actually in about an hour, Bert is going to be presenting at the bond buyers annual event, our Green Liberty bond that we issued this year in recognition of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, won the Innovation Award from bond buyers. So Bert is going to be presenting on a panel, I think about 4 o'clock, 3:30, I think. Later on today, I could send out details for those who are interested. But this is great. This was our first official municipal bond. We're currently working on another bond issuance that will likely be ready in the second quarter of next year. That will include a lot of different assets that we currently have. And our goal there is to engage citizens in investing in projects that we support in the community. And again, this was recognized by Bond Buyer, which evidently is a really important award in the municipal bond industry. So I think that was my last slide and kind of update. Any questions, comments? Okay, well, happy to, Glenn, you and I can coordinate, Steve, Liz, same thing, between now and the middle of January on any possible adjustments.
Hey, Brian, excuse me, Eric, I just had one comment, which is, I know that there was a certain amount of risk involved with putting together the bond program, and it was very complicated, which I could tell just based on the reports, the interim reports about what was needed to put it together. But I never anticipated that it would create this biggest splash, and I think that that's really terrific, and it really shows the desire of the public to find ways to support green, and especially if there's a return on it. So it's really just it's not just a success, but it's a marker for other people to pursue. So that's very cool, and congratulations on that.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, we've had the ability to issue bonds in our statute since the summer of 2012, when we worked with the Treasurer's Office on that. And we've really focused, for the subsequent 6 to 7 years on building a track record and demonstrating what we could do with the Green Bank model, which really then positioned us. Many of you were involved in our offsite strategic retreat, and we all recognize the need to mobilize more investment in the deployment of clean energy. So we saw this as an engine that we could fine tune and build. And we spent, the last year and a half building it. And this was our first issuance. And we called it the Green Liberty Bond for a reason. We think that the bond structure can be replicated by anyone who is issuing bonds that reduce greenhouse gas emissions or make themselves more resilient to the impacts of climate change. But we wanted to make sure that those bonds are available for purchase by citizens, because typically bonds are issued at large denominations and they're only available for institutional investors. So we felt strongly in that strategic retreat, coming from that retreat, and in the design of this structure, that we wanted people to be able to invest in this too. So stay tuned for version 2.0. It's going to be really cool. It's going to have more projects, within it, things like schools and state projects and municipal projects, so that our citizens can feel that they are a part of supporting their communities beyond, rooftop solar and into other areas.
Terrific. Glenn, you carrying us into the C&LM plan?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Eric. All right. So before I, so the major focus of this fairly brief presentation is going to be the 2022 to 2024 plan process. But before we get into that, I just want to remind the audience that on or about November 1st, the companies filed their updated 2021 plan. We are awaiting approval, which will probably come with some conditions of approval from DEEP. And then a final reminder, we go through a budget true-up process, as well as address, in many cases, conditions of approval in a subsequent March 1st filing. But again, that's for the 2021 plan update, the final year of the current 2019 to 2021 three-year plan. So nonetheless, I'm going to segue now into the next three-year plan cycle. While I have the current plan priorities up here, I think they're still relevant. The board has yet to revisit and potentially revise these plan priorities. These plan priorities were created at the beginning of the three-year plan. The current one, we've revisited them and we've largely kept them intact over the current three-year plan, and I think they still provide a useful reminder as to what is driving our efforts through the C&LM plan. Advanced state energy and environmental policy, certainly pursuing energy efficiency and demand reduction. One thing I'll note as we move into the next 3-year plan cycle, the board will need to give some thought to what its roles are in regards to addressing issues like electrification and the role of efficiency, and to maybe a lesser extent demand response, and also supporting the state's greenhouse gas goals. Tailored solutions, certainly in the C&I side, efforts have been made to look more carefully at discrete market segments, either by size or by business activity. Similarly, we are pursuing similar efforts on the residential side, having looked at, though not yet, developing specific offerings for moderate income customers, and similar to the Green Bank, obviously over the past several months, the issue of addressing equity and equitable distribution of fund expenditures and offering of services has become very front and center. And I'll note that one of the things that's being worked on for the March 1 update of the 2021 plan is a equity metric on both the residential and the C&I side, which would be tied to performance incentives paid to the companies based upon attainment of those yet to be defined goals. Focus on direct savings to customers. 87% of program budget are direct program services, the large majority of that incentives, other amounts for labor and program marketing. Sustainable workforce, we through a number of activities support efforts to community college, training of our vendors, and it wouldn't be surprised if those activities are stepped up in the next 3-year plan. Comprehensiveness continues to be an important part of what we do, particularly as we're moving away from looking at single end-use opportunities to more complete and comprehensive treatment, and particularly on a multi-fuel basis. More recently, DEEP in its conditions for the 2020 plan made clear that we should be looking at all fuel savings. Historically, that has been a focus of the residential sector, less so on the C&I sector. Demand reduction, in addition to energy efficiency, is becoming increasingly important, both through passive demand savings that are tied to energy efficiency investments, as well as to direct load control and load response and load management activities, often referred to as active demand. And then finally, relevant to this group in this conversation, continue to explore and implement financing options to help leverage our incentive dollars. Next slide. All right. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this is the board schedule for the next 3-year plan in terms of the board's activities. Areas that are in bold refer to activities occurring during board meetings. Activities that aren't in bold are activities that would occur in that month, but outside of the normal board meeting. For example, in March, we're planning our first public input session that would occur in March, but not during a board meeting. So there's a fair amount that we plan to undertake over the coming months, and looking, to a November 1st filing for the next 3-year plan. Before I go to the next slide, just any quick questions on the board schedule here? Okay, why don't we move on? All right. There's 2 pages here. I'm not going to read through these. These are here for people's information, but this was an effort to link our programs and our regulatory and statutory authorities and direction. And clearly, energy efficiency is front and center, but also, other things that we do, including specific activities, for example, not surprisingly, to address low-income customers, look at our ability to promote and commercialize new technologies. Next page, please. Addressing the issue of joint fuel efficiency beyond just the regulated fuels, electricity, and natural gas that we serve, as well as ancillary benefits like water conservation and indoor air quality programs. Next slide, please. All right, so there are a few slides here, and this is, I think, interesting and useful information just to provide some context as to where the C&LM programs achieve their savings, both by sector and by fuel. There probably tends to be a somewhat greater emphasis on electricity savings, and you can see here from this slide that the very large majority, 80% of electricity savings on a lifetime basis, not annual but lifetime, is coming from the C&I sector. However, next slide. When you look at natural gas savings, while not quite reversed, the majority of natural gas savings, 63%, are coming from the residential sector. Almost all of that for space heating and water heating purposes. Next slide. And I think interestingly, when you combine the fuels and add in delivered fuels, which is that 18% green pie segment in the pie chart, you see that the split is almost even, 54% residential, 46% C&I. And while 18% of lifetime MMBTU savings, so these are all converted to a similar MMBTU format, while delivered fuels are a large part of the residential lifetime savings, they are effectively zero for C&I. Whether and how that will change in the coming 3-year plan is another topic for discussion. Again, there has not been a concerted effort in the past to direct ratepayer dollars to specifically target delivered fuel savings in the C&I sector. I think, oh, we have a demand slide, and one more slide, please. And as I mentioned, demand savings are important. The majority of demand savings are coming from the C&I sector. Most of those, the purple slice, which is just shy of half, are coming from active demand activities, with almost a quarter on the C&I sector coming from passive. And again, passive demand savings are those associated with efficiency investments. And I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so a little bit of a whirlwind, but just kind of wanted to go over the plan priorities, and also just provide some information. Board members and the companies have seen some of this before. These graphs were presented at the last board meeting, but we thought it would be interesting to the Green Bank and others, to have a little grounding in where our savings are projected to be coming from. And these are the 2021 file numbers, which have yet to be reviewed and approved by DEEP.
Great. And Glenn, this is Brian. Just one other comment. So Glenn and I have talked, and we're looking to bring our respective kind of teams together in early January to dive a little bit deeper. And Glenn will set the agenda for us, but more work to be done, or conversations to be had as we work together on this.
Yeah. The 3-year plan process has just started. There's certainly interest in, while ratepayer dollars might not be spent, for example, through the efficiency funds, and I'll just say, for example, on renewables, electric vehicles, there are nonetheless opportunities for us to integrate and co-promote and leverage our respective programs so that, each helps and leverages the other's activities. And certainly financing, is an important and critical component, both the C&I and the residential efficiency program. So look forward to those discussions, Brian. Questions? Comments? I don't know, Steve, or I'm not sure if Liz is on, if the companies wanted to add anything.
That's good, Glenn. Thanks. I don't know if you hit the budgets, but the combined electric was 188 million and the gas was 53 for a combined 2021 budget of like $240 million. So still a lot of investment for customers to invest in energy efficiency across the state.
Thank you, Steve.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Glenn.
This is John Harity. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're up, John. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that, and it may be stating the obvious, but in terms of the whole issue of equity, beyond the issue of customers, I think that there's a hope and, in fact, an expectation that the issue of equity and would be addressed also in workforce development issues.
Mm-hmm. Good point, and thank you. Yep.
That's a good point, John, too, because one of the the important data pieces from our clean energy industry report was, in fact, kind of the lack of equity in terms of diversity of our workforce. So that is something that we now have a better sense of, and we all need to work harder to ensure a more diverse workforce consistent with our population.
All right. Very good. Thank you again. We'll move on to number 7. Preparing for what should be a very unique legislative session.
Great, thank you. So this is Brian from the Green Bank. I will walk through kind of the Green Bank's legislative priorities for the session, and feel free, Deep and EDC colleagues, to provide your thoughts as well. I don't want to state the obvious. We all know what the key overarching item is heading into this legislative session, but let me speak to some of the other policy priorities that the Green Bank has. One is expanding the scope of the Green Bank. This was an area that we've been looking at for a while in terms of moving beyond clean energy, looking at environmental infrastructure. The Green Bank model can be applied to not only clean energy, as we've demonstrated over nearly the last decade, but we think can also be applied to modernizing our environmental infrastructure throughout the state. Things like waste, water, land conservation, resiliency, and the like. So we are working with various, legislative and executive branch leaders on broadening the scope of the Green Bank. Now that we have our Green Liberty Bond structure in place, we believe that by showing how this can be applied to environmental projects, we can scale up by issuing bonds and use bond capital as the source to finance such projects. So stay tuned. This would be a big lift. It's not atypical of green banks. There are green banks across the country that do things beyond clean energy. Residential solar PV. So I was alluding to it earlier. The RCIP has essentially hit 350 megawatts of approved projects. We're just a little shy of that, but we have about 320 megawatts of projects that are have been commissioned. The goal is 350 having been commissioned. We have taken a look over the course of the last 6 to 9 months at the impacts of COVID on the industry. And by every measure, from looking at our own data to having surveys with the industry, to having polling with the industry, to looking at job losses, some of the memos that we've been sharing with you all, by all measure, this industry is not stable, just as I'm sure our colleagues see with the efficiency industry. So we have taken it, our board has supported 32 megawatts of additional capacity underneath the RCIP, 10 megawatts beyond 350 to 360 is to ensure that we hit 350. We tend to have churn, lost projects. So by adding an additional 10, we think we'll be able to hit the 350 megawatts of deployed projects, and then an additional 22 megawatts of projects to support, to ensure that the industry navigates through the instability that COVID has caused. Hopefully that 22 megawatts will get us through the legislative session so that the legislators can talk about whether or not to extend the RCIP program. So that is what the second piece is there. And it's our hope that we could get the cap increased to essentially get the RCIP to the tariff. The solar market, or the behind the meter renewable energy market in Connecticut, is moving from net metering to a tariff-based compensation structure that may begin as soon as January 1st of 2022. So getting from here to there and ensuring that the market transitions from net metering to a tariff is also a focus of ours. And of course, every project would have to have HES or HES-IE at some point in the project. CPACE, a few possible changes to CPACE. One would be including EV recharging stations. We can already do that per our statute. Alternative fuel vehicle infrastructure is within our definition of clean energy. But what we want to do is exempt this from the savings to investment ratio calculation that has to be done per the statute, as well as adding climate resiliency measures within CPACE. So if somebody wants to improve stormwater runoff at their facility or make their facility more resilient to flooding, we want to use CPACE to be able to finance those types of projects. This isn't atypical. Programs in Florida, programs in California all have their various forms of resiliency components to their PACE programs. And then a few other optimizations to the programs that have to deal with how we work and interact with municipalities in payments and transferring payments and the like. So some structural things that will make the program more efficient. And then lastly, for those of you who've been following, the Class 1 exemption, property tax exemption for third-party owned solar PV systems. There are a number of towns that are challenging third-party owned systems in terms of property taxes. We believe it's clear in statute that solar is exempt from property taxes, but a number of towns have decided to take up the issue. I don't know, Brian, if you wanted to add anything here, given some of the legal work that's been happening across the state in the courts, but
yeah, nothing really too much to add. It's been a really frustrating experience. It's a handful of towns, and part of the problem is that this money is in dispute, and some of the towns, instead of like putting it aside, are including it in part of their spending of the year. So it's, I feel like the solar contractors and the Green Bank believe we're on firm ground here. As a Coffee public, I really want to find a solution, and I will pretty much compromise to get this behind us in any way. I think some of the big solar developers are probably not as flexible as we are, and it's stuck in litigation, which is a slow, costly process.
Thank you, Brian. So those are the four areas that we're focused in on, as well as working with you all to ensure the budget.
Hey, Brian, this is Ron. Just wanted to comment that I think increasing the cap by 100 megawatts for RCIP would be very much welcome by many of the energy efficiency contractors. I know that was something they were looking for. I think it was last year or the year before last. I can't remember now which, but I think you'll find a lot of receptivity to that. To your point, there is a lot of energy efficiency work in the residential sector that's generated by the need of having the HES assessment as part of the solar installation.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Ron. We did receive, after the board approved the extension to address COVID, several of them thanking us for doing that. Obviously, we appreciate all that. Our goal is to simply stabilize the industry because it's unstable. But yeah, much appreciated.
Hey, Brian, it's Mike. For the property tax, can you just clarify, is the Class 1 exemption for all Class 1 resources or just residential solar? The existing exemption.
It's Class 1 resources, in fact, that are used for on-site use. So obviously, if you got a facility that is pumping out electricity, in a power plant, for example, or back into the grid, that would not be exempt. The commercial exemption is even clearer than the residential. That's why this is really focused on the residential exemption, because there is some ambiguity in the statute.
Yeah, I think,
what's
Mike,
the commercial exemption?
I think it has
commercial entity. A commercial entity that puts solar panels on its roof, those panels would be exempt from property tax. That's what I mean by commercial exemption. I don't mean commercial as in they're selling electricity. I mean, like, if you're a manufacturer and you put PV on your roof, that PV system will be exempt. And the residential exemption, which is similar to the commercial exemption, it's just a little bit more ambiguous, and that's causing this handful of towns to fight it.
I was just going to add to that, Brian. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it also deals with the fact on the commercial buildings, the solar that's being produced is also being simultaneously consumed by the project. So you don't typically see any export to the grid, whereas in the residential sector, you could have 50% of the production actually being exported to the grid. So it's that export where it's being, hypothetically sold back to the grid that is that's providing some foundation to municipalities to make this claim.
Yeah, there is some truth that they're trying to use that, but they also have some flawed understanding of like how solar works, and they don't understand the seasonal impact that, although a solar residential home may be providing energy back to the grid through net metering, it's merely a credit on the bill. There's seasonal adjustments. At the end of the year, there's net, there's typically not an issue of them selling back more than they actually use. It's the seasonal flow issue comes into play.
Good point.
So just another question, not to belabor this point, but so like in the last legislative session, I don't know if I think you were there, Brian, there was like a few towns came in and they were complaining because they don't get property taxes on these like solar fields that are being installed. I mean, is that true? I didn't quite exactly follow the argument.
Well, if it's a big solar field that is selling electricity, those systems are not exempt. So I'm not sure what they're talking. And in fact, I think
they were right. I guess that was what my take was too. But maybe the argument was around virtual net metering, and if that basically allows them to say that it's like on-site, used on-site, so to speak.
Yeah, there may be some C&LM arguments that they're trying to bring forward. And here's the sad reality is,
yeah, that was
especially with COVID, budgets are very tight right now, and people
Yeah.
are looking under the couch cushions for money, as we all know, and this is one of those attempts.
Yeah, this is Steve Bruce. Another quick question, kind of different topic, but basically, do you see any concerns with how there was a fund sweep back in 2017 that there's the potential for it to happen again? Do you think we're in good shape overall?
I think this next legislative session, we're in good shape, but we all need to be very vigilant and make sure we are all singing from the same, hymn piece and working together, because we're much stronger together as a team than separately. And I think if you look at the budget projections, sooner or later, certain legislators will propose sweeps of both funds, and we just need to make sure we stay guarded.
Thanks. And Brian, Mike, were you going to say something as well?
Oh, sorry. No, nothing to add.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Great. I didn't know, are there any legislative discussion from the C&LM board side of things?
Eric, this is Ron. I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing from Steve to add.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for that summary. We'll move on now to our reports on the various committees that are working on the residential and C&I sectors. So I guess we'll start with, I'll go with what's on the board here, which is C&I government.
Mac, you good?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Mackie Dykes with Green Bank. I think actually, if you'll go to the next slide, that, let the companies start off with these items.
Sounds good. This is Steve Bruno, and then Liz Murphy will also do some of the slides as we go through a section with Mackie. But from the government perspective, the Small Business Energy Advantage loan size, which covers both small business loans, including municipal loans. Both of those programs, the Eversource program was expanded to $1 million per project per town, basically. And then the term was extended from 4 years maximum to 7 years. And these are loans that for Eversource, we fund with the Energy Efficiency Fund first, then we resell back to the amalgamated Green Bank recapitalization process. UI was $500,000 per state agency, municipality, and their term was extended from 4 years to 5 years. In terms of the loan recap from the Eversource perspective, where muni loans are included in the portfolio of what we resell, for 2020, there were about 67 projects. 20 were for munis, like you could have multiple projects per muni, so about 20 munis were impacted with loans, and then some state projects as well, so $1.7 million. And then since the recap started in 2018, there were 433 projects with municipalities and state projects, totaling about $9.1 million in loans that were resold to the amalgamated Green Bank recapitalization process. So good activity from the municipalities in 2020.
Great, thanks, Steve.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Perfect. This is Liz Murphy. So I'll cover the first two slides. So we've talked a little bit about this at previous meetings, but Eversource and UI have been working really closely with DEEP, the Energy Efficiency Board, our vendors, and other regional energy efficiency partners on developing and implementing our COVID-19 mitigation strategy to ensure that we can continue to support our customers and our clean energy contractors throughout the pandemic. So really for us, rebuilding the energy efficiency project pipeline has been a top priority. And in an effort to stimulate program participation with support from DEEP, we announced over the summer an enhanced incentive structure as well as enhanced financing options for commercial and industrial customers, including our small business customers. This slide shows the new enhanced incentive structure, and we increased our incentive levels across the board for all efficiency measures that we support through our programs. And just to give you an example of the magnitude of the incentive changes, our standard lighting incentive increased from 25 cents per kWh, previously capped at 25% of project cost, to 40 cents per kWh, capped at 45% of project cost. So we've really seen a lot of activity around lighting projects now that customers are able to get a higher incentive on those projects. We also rolled out a distressed customer offer to support our commercial and industrial customers that are struggling as a result of the pandemic, as well as those that are located in distressed municipalities. So qualifying customers are eligible to receive an incentive covering up to 80% of the total project costs. And this has really helped us to move the needle for some customers who really otherwise would not have the means at this time to pursue their energy efficiency projects. Next slide, please. So this slide just highlights some of the additional actions that we've taken as part of our COVID-19 mitigation strategy throughout the C&I sector. Of course, health and safety has remained a top focus for us. So the company's executed contract addenda with our small business energy advantage vendors to help facilitate the safe resumption of on-site work over the summer, and really to ensure that we can continue to serve our customers in a safe and timely manner. So we were anxious to get vendors back to work as quickly as possible, of course, with safety remaining the top priority. Our ability to finance energy efficiency project work has really proven to be very critical right now. So we are offering a 6-month deferral for the start of small business energy advantage loan repayment. So our small business customers can apply for 0% on-bill financing to cover their out-of-pocket energy efficiency project costs, and under the deferral, they will not have to start repaying that loan for 6 months following project completion. So that's really helped to improve the cash flow for some of our small business customers that are moving forward with their projects. Of course, the virtualization of various processes has been a really significant aspect of our mitigation strategy, and in an effort to overcome some of the challenges that we are experiencing due to on-premise restrictions, we've introduced virtual inspections in lieu of on-site inspections, and have also allowed for other remote methods of verification, such as accepting photos and other means to satisfy inspection requirements. And along similar lines, we introduced a virtual pre-assessment option for small business customers. So the assessment is conducted by a small business vendor using an app or technology that allows them to walk the customer through the energy audit process in their facility. And then following that initial virtual pre-assessment, the customer sent a package of measures that they can self-install. And if they so choose, they can schedule a follow-up on-site audit to identify additional, more comprehensive opportunities if they're comfortable having the vendor in their facility. And then in an effort to improve our vendor cash flow, we've introduced progress payments commensurate with the percentage of work completed. So we've identified milestones throughout the project installation process where we're able to make progress payments to vendors. UI launched an online limited time offer allowing our C&I customers to purchase deeply discounted energy saving product bundles. We promoted this out through various channels, including through our chamber partners, and it was really successful to the point where we decided to do a second push in Q4. We are looking for a more permanent online marketplace option for our C&I customers, but we may do a third push on this offering in early 2021, depending on the timing of that other effort. We saw a lot of really great participation. And with guidance from DEEP, the small business program aggregation rules were relaxed. So this essentially allowed for more customers to qualify for the small business program just by modifying how we qualify customers based on their energy consumption. And lastly, I just want to highlight another really neat pilot that we launched. It's called the Micro Business Energy Advantage Pilot, and it targets our smallest commercial customers and offers a simplified participation pathway that's supplemented with guaranteed financing for the customer. So we created bilingual customer-facing materials that are available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese that highlight energy-saving tips geared towards small businesses, as well as rebates that are available for specific segments such as food service. We've done a big push with restaurants this year that we're going to carry into 2021. And there's been really great reception from our small business vendors around this pilot. So we're happy to see some good activity there. And as part of our 2021 C&LM plan update, we did include transitioning this pilot into a permanent program offering. And then the next slide, I will hand it back to Steve to cover.
Mikey, do you want to hit the first couple bullets?
Yep. So good afternoon. This is Mike. Thanks for Green Bank. So on the financing side of things, where we are with CPACE, so we've done 18 projects for a total of 11.5 million. Brian walked through our targets earlier. With regards to the lower end of that range, we're 62% and 84% respectively towards those goals. So, on track to either meet or exceed them, even given the COVID circumstances we're operating in. To continue to drive project volume in this challenging environment, we've launched 2 initiatives. The first is our Charge Up CT Buildings campaign, which gives EV chargers to a building owner that finances a project using CPACE. This is focused on energy efficiency projects. The vast majority of CPACE projects are solar projects, so we're trying to build out the efficiency market. So this campaign is targeted on and trying to incentivize those EE projects. And then for all projects, given the economic circumstances, we're offering flexible repayment options on CPACE financing. You can defer payments for up to 1.5 years. So that would be no payments from when your project completes for up to 1.5 years, or you can make interest-only payments for up to 3 years. The goal there is just, start getting those energy savings into building owners' pockets before they need to start paying back on the CPACE financing. Steve and Liz, I'm going to turn it back to you for the SBA update.
Sure, I'll hit all of them. It's okay. Liz had updated the UI information for small business, and then the SBA for Eversource is below, just because we do the capitalization of it separately, so we'll break them out separately. But it looks like UI's numbers are 128 loans for 2.6 million. As a comparison to 2019, there was 164 loans with about almost $3 million. From the Eversource perspective, we've been having a tough time with the small businesses in Connecticut with the COVID. So our numbers are not as good in 2020 as 2019. So Eversource, 359 loans, $6.5 million compared to 2019, where we had 800 loans and $14 million. So definitely a tough year for the small businesses, and we're trying to get more financing to help them out, but the volume has not ticked up yet for us yet on that front. But in terms of the overall recap that we had done for the portfolio, since 2018, we've sold to the amalgamated Green Bank combination over 5,000 loans, $61 million in loan capital. So overall, the whole concept of the loan recapitalization was fantastic. We're just having a tough year in 2020 with the small business market and customers investing in the projects. Hopefully that's going to pick up. I know there's some offers that Liz has referred to in the previous slide that will help turn things around. And Eversource kicked off with the same thing with the recapitalization process, offering BEA financing BEA customers. Their customers slightly above the small business size. We would give them financing, but they would get a reduced incentive to get that financing. We've had 3 loans, been an informal kickoff with that, and then we're looking to do a formal rollout in January with the market and the contractors. And I guess in closing, I'd just like to say that it was a good year working with Mackie and team with the Green Bank and Amalgamated. Some of the changes we made to the programs to allow more muni projects and state projects. We're hoping the state gets further along in the MOU process with using the small business model and bring more projects through in 2021. And then with the vehicle in place, it should allow us to do financing for them as well. That's all I had.
Yep, good here. Just want to thank the companies for the great work this year. We've it took us a couple of years to get the SBA structure in place. Did that, started that capital flowing, and over the last year, I've seen the changes we just talked through to expand the parameters of the financing. The muni, the state, and now will be launched in 2021, having the same structure for larger businesses that qualify for BEA.
Great. Well, great work, and thanks for the briefing on the C&I side. Impressive stuff. Let's see, Glenn, are you doing the single family and multifamily, or?
No, Eric, this is Ron. I think that's going to be me.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron, because I wasn't prepared to do that. Good.
Okay. Just want to provide an update on single family and multifamily. And this kind of is a little overview, and I'll get into a little bit more of the details in the following slides. But on the single family side, we are planning on making some changes to the incentives that we currently have in place for our home energy solutions program. We did make some changes due to COVID in 2020 to stimulate activity. And essentially, the copay was reduced from $75 down to no cost for market rate customers. And we also increased the incentive level for insulation to $2.20 a square foot, which, based upon our analysis, would indicate that the typical customer that would require attic insulation would essentially get that attic insulation at no cost. We also, for 2021, we are looking at, for air source heat pumps, introducing a new qualified product list, essentially looking at having some additional criteria that the heat pumps will need to meet. And we are also going to, for air source heat pumps, have 2 tiers of heat pump incentives. And like I said, I'll get to that a little bit more later on. For multifamily, the program will look very similar to 2020 and 2021. We would be adopting the air source heat pump qualified product list for multifamily heat pumps. And we are continuing to offer the electric resistance to heat pump conversion incentives, and I have a slide on that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned, we had reduced the cost of the HES visit to 0, and what our plan is for the first quarter, or effective April 1st, any customer who enrolls in our home energy solutions program would now pay a $50 co-payment for participating in the program. With respect to installation, also beginning April 1, customers who have assessments on April 1 or later would get an incentive of $1.70 a square foot. Any customer who has participated in HES prior to April 1 would receive $2.20 a square foot, provided that they have the insulation installed and the rebate form submitted by the end of June of 2021. We also have a double pane window incentive that we've had for a number of years at $50 per window for double pane windows, and that's something we plan to continue in 2021. In 2020, we did introduce a a standalone or open market triple pane window rebate of $100 a window. And that had very slow traction this year, so we're going to keep that open through the end of 2021 and try to see if we can continue on trying to get some momentum on triple pane windows. We are starting to see a late season tick up, but many of the window projects really won't get installed now until first quarter of 2021. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay. Next slide, please. All right. With respect to heat pumps, a couple of things here. First, we do have some very good ground source heat pump incentives that were approved by DEEP. We increased it to $750 a ton in 2020 for any customer who heats their home electrically, and for customers who heat their home with oil or propane, that was increased to $1,500 a ton. And we do have a cap of $10,000 per home. These rebates are in effect today for 2020, and we plan on having them in effect for 2021 as well. With respect to air source heat pumps, effective April 1 through the end of the year, any sales will have to align with a new regional heat pump qualification criteria. And I'm going to go over the incentives on the next slide, and I have the criteria listed there, so we can talk about that there. We also have a two-tier air source heat pump incentive structure that we're implementing effective January 1st of 2021. And essentially, that's still utilizing the qualifying criteria we have in place in 2020. The difference is that higher efficiency equipment would get a greater rebate than the lower efficiency equipment. And then for HES participants, we do have some rebates available for heat pumps that are unique for customers who participate in the HES program. And any customer who participates in HES has electric resistance heat and converts it to an air source heat pump. In addition to the normal heat pump incentive, they also get a $1,000 per ton rebate for participating in HES and installing the heat pump. And we are still operating a fuel optimization heat pump pilot, and the rebates there are $1,000 a ton for any customer who installs a heat pump to either fully or partially displace their legacy fuel heating system. And as part of that, we also offer controls for incentives for integrated controls of $500 per unit up to a maximum of $1,500 per home. Next slide, please. All right, this gives right here gives the detail on air source heat pumps, what we're offering for incentives. Essentially, we'll have two tiers. The lower tier of efficiency would be at $250 a ton. And just to point out, I say it's a lower tier of efficiency, but these are still much more efficient than Energy Star minimum rated equipment. The higher tier is at $500 a ton, and you can see there that the SEER is slightly greater from an efficiency level in that particular instance for the ductless single zone as an example. The other thing I'll point out is something new that we've added from a criteria standpoint, and that is a heating capacity ratio. And what we're doing is trying to make sure that we have the units that are going in can meet at least a 58% heating capacity ratio as it relates to the ductless single zone or the ducted and ductless multi-zone heat pumps. With respect to central air source heat pumps, the incentive is still going to be a flat $500 per ton for centrally ducted heat pumps. But we did introduce a heating capacity ratio, and that heating capacity ratio is slightly higher at 60% from a heating capacity ratio. Any questions on this slide or the previous slide?
John Harity, I had a question, which is, are you doing anything in order to educate customers about air source heat pumps? Because I just have the feeling, well, based on myself and other people, that there may not be a lot of knowledge about that particular product or the advantages.
That's actually an excellent question, John. We do have information in our HES pod, and so we do have some educational material, but this is an area that we think we need to do more work on, not only with our HES vendors who go out and talk to the customers, but even with the HVAC contractor community. There does seem to be what I would call uneven education on heat pump technology. Many of the heat pump contractors or the HVAC contractors that install heat pumps that are affiliated with manufacturers seem to do a very good job of getting them installed, knowing the right applications, where they'll work well, how they'll work, and can convey that to the customer. But that's not true of every HVAC contractor that's out there. So I think there's more work for us to do, and one of the things that we are planning in 2021 is to do more HVAC contractor education in that particular realm. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Hey, John, this is Mike Lee. I mean, I'll just say that, this is something that Deep is very interested in. And to the extent that, you or anybody else on the Green Bank side have ideas about how we could approach this, I think we're all ears at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mike. All right, next slide, please. All right, with respect to multifamily, the point I wanted to highlight here is one of the things that we did introduce in 2020 and we will continue offering in 2021 is a incentive structure for multifamily dwelling units that convert from electric resistant to heat pumps. And what we did is we ended up classifying the conversions into two categories. One would be small multifamily, 2 to 19 units that were attached, and then 20 or more attached dwelling units. And we broke that up to based on some analysis that we had done as far as how to make this a very convenient and easy way to get property owners on board and get conversions happen. And we've actually seen some very good traction in this area in 2020. It does, again, heat pump installations do take a while to go out, size appropriately, order and get installed, but we're actually now seeing projects that we started working on this summer that are starting to close out since we've introduced this. So we are starting to see some traction, and we're very optimistic that we're going to see very good traction in continuation into 2021 on this effort. We also recognize that there's an opportunity for control integration. And for the smaller units, we actually have a very prescriptive format. With the larger projects, we actually have that integrated right into the overall cost of the system, because the cost of the system is based upon the energy savings versus a prescriptive rebate on a per unit basis. Any questions on this? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and okay, this one looks a little bit different, but this is I can speak to this. With respect to how things have been looking on the financing perspective, we did make some changes in 2020 to the HES payment plan, or some people call it the micro loan, and those will be continued into 2021. One of the things we did is that we expanded the eligibility to HES-IE customers, our income eligible customers. Based upon intelligence that we had received from the contractor community, there were occasionally instances where customers, particularly for window installations, may have needed to come up with 5 to $1,000 to get the windows installed, and there was really no convenient means for them to get a loan. So what we did is we looked at expanding the HES loan to be able to accommodate that type of instance. We also expanded the loan to include windows and heat pumps as well, because prior to last year, windows were not an eligible measure from that perspective. And we also lowered the minimum loan from $1,000 down to $500. Again, a lot of this was based upon a vendor or contractor input that we had, where there was certain jobs that we basically fell into a void, and this was a convenient way to try to keep those projects moving forward. With respect to how the loans have been performing this year, the heating loan is actually performing very well this year. Really has not lost pace from where it was in 2019 with regards to performance. We have seen a pretty significant drop in the HES or the payment plan or the microloan. And a lot of that has to do with the fact, as I mentioned earlier, we have much more robust incentives for insulation. So the customer need for financing has decreased associated with that. The energy conservation loan product is essentially doing about the same as last year. And then we did see a drop off on the SMART-E activity from what we've seen in 2019. And a lot of that may be due to the fact that we're not seeing as many larger projects, but I think the next slide, the Green Bank's going to be going over some of what they see, and they may have some additional insight into that. Any questions on this slide? Okay. And Brian, are you taking this one?
Joe B.
Yep.
Joe,
Hi,
oh, I know Joe was on the phone.
Thanks, Ron. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Buonanotte with Inclusive Prosperity Capital. Thanks for having me. I'll give a brief update on both the SMART-E loan and then the Posigen Solar for All efforts, and then turn it over to my colleague, Kim Stevenson, who will discuss multifamily. So SMART-E is doing well so far this fiscal year. It's exceeding the expectations that we had set initially prior to July 1st. We thought that COVID would have some sort of impact on the program, but it does continue to be buoyed heavily by HVAC installations. And now as we approach the end of the calendar year with an increase in solar projects who are trying to meet the federal investment tax credit deadline. So we're averaging about 70 closed loans per month, and we had targeted 45. So we're looking to potentially adjust that for our mid-year budget adjustment. We launched a 2.99 special financing offer on July 1st for heat pumps, both air source and ground source heat pumps, and those are paired with energy assessments through the Home Energy Solutions Program. Another qualifying technology for the 299 special offer is battery storage, both retrofitting existing solar installations and new solar and storage installations, though any new solar and storage installation would qualify for a blended rate. So we're providing the 299 special offer solely on the battery storage piece. And then the final technology that qualifies is our EV charging stations for homes. We had allocated a $1 million budget for that special financing offer. We're currently at about 20% of that budget that's been committed for these loans. So we have quite a good deal amount left, and we anticipate that special offer being available through Q3 of the fiscal year. So we're looking at least the first few months of 2021 for that special offer to be in the market. The special offer has we've closed 87 loans to date through that special offer. They've been primarily about almost 90% heat pumps and home energy solutions assessment. Those assessments are either new assessments that are just happening now, or we allowed for customers to show proof of having completed a home energy solutions assessment within the last 3 years. And in terms of the term breakdown for those loans, we're seeing those skew largely towards the 10-year term, with some at 5 years and some at 7 years. But primarily, most folks are financing at the 10-year term. Geothermal ground source heat pumps, we've done 10 of those at the 299 special offer rate, and just 2 so far on the battery storage side. Slower uptick on that. To touch on the question about education around heat pumps, so we did create some marketing material specific to the Smarty 299 special offer for heat pumps. And we linked to a new buying guide that was put together by NEEP, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships of Massachusetts. They launched a buying guide, or they created a buying guide with unbiased information about residential air source heat pumps in early 2020. And it's a great user-friendly, consumer-friendly info piece about what are heat pumps, how do they work, how to price them, what questions to ask for contractors. I can share that with this larger group if that's of interest to the committee members and EEP and the companies, because it's a really great resource that I think more folks should be aware of. So that's the Smarty update. Any questions on that piece? All right, so if not, then just quickly on Posigen, the Solar for All campaign. There were 2 campaigns that ran this year, one in Bristol and the other a combined effort of Mansfield and Wyndham. And looking ahead to 2021, there's an expectation for 2 more of those campaigns, one in the city of Waterbury and then the other in Norwalk. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to Kim Stevenson.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to provide an update on the multifamily programs, the Green Bank multifamily programs. Our focus over the last 6-8 months has really been on marketing the Energize Connecticut Health and Safety Revolving Loan Fund, as well as solar power purchase agreements for multifamily properties. On the PPA front, there's been a particular focus on congregate housing that is funded by Chatham Department of Housing, promoting cost savings. Many of those properties have all owner paid utilities, and they're good prospects for that product. So we have a pipeline that we're working on there on the PPA front. On the health and safety front, we're actually in process of closing on a small multifamily scattered site project in Bridgeport. These are 2, 3, and 4 unit multifamily properties that are owned by a single owner. They're scattered site in a transitional neighborhood, and we're excited about this because this is the hardest to reach sector, the small multis, and this may become at least one model or tool for supporting these types of properties. On the health and safety front, we would welcome the company's support in jointly marketing that program. I know that we talked about that at the November 12th residential committee meeting, and I will reach out to move forward on that at the beginning of the new year in January. On the Lime Loan front, that's the low-income multifamily energy program. That program has now been renamed to Loans Improving Multifamily Efficiency. This is the term loan program, project financing that we run jointly with Capital for Change. That program has been really on hold under COVID, with Capital for Change being quite conservative about underwriting and making additional loans until we all really understand the multifamily market and the impact of COVID. That program will be relaunched again in the spring and expanded to fund not only properties that serve low and moderate income residents, but also market rate properties, and in particular, those properties with tenant paid utilities that we previously haven't been able to underwrite and fund under this program. So we're excited about that happening. We've done kind of a preview on that for both of the companies, and we'll be working with everyone to get that program relaunched and back out there in the market in the spring. And then one other final thing that I'd just like to talk about in terms of work that we've been doing. The Green Bank multifamily team has been advocating and supporting both CHAFA and the Department of Housing in convening a sustainability work group that's focused in particular on designing the competitive point system for low-income housing tax credits, the 9% low-income housing tax credits. This is important because the 9% tax credits are the primary source of equity for building new affordable housing in the state, and it's been the point system process that CHAFA and DOH have established that has really pushed development of passive house and high performance buildings in this sector. The most recent point system that came out was actually retroactive. It has decreased the incentives for building high performance and passive house buildings. We've been collaborating with them to really kind of move that back and really think about how to do that work, and have pulled the companies into that conversation. Just this morning, Nick Jones gave a great presentation on the incentives that the utility companies are providing. That was attended by the DOH commissioner and the CEO of CHAFA. They are now moving forward with some really progressive standards, and we're going to continue to push development of that and collaboration on that front with everyone. So I'll end there. Any questions on any of that?
No questions for Kim?
Sounds
Okay.
good. Great.
Very good. Thank you, Kim. Okay, I guess at this point we're at the agenda for any other business that people want to raise. Okay. All right, well, fond farewell to 2020. Thank you all for all your participation and contributions this year. And it looks like with the potential expansion of Green Bank legislative authority, and there may be some of that going on with the ECMB as well. So new administration in Washington. So all kinds of possibilities. So unless there's anything else, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
John Harity, so moved.
Thank you, John. We have a second.
This is Mike. I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you all very much. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you soon.
Happy holidays, all.
Bye-bye.